All right, let's jump right in. What if I told you there's a theory out there that claims to explain all of comedy? I'm talking everything from a silly little pun all the way up to the very structure of reality itself. It's this big, cyclical, self-reinforcing idea, kind of like that old symbol of a snake eating its own tail. So let's dive into this wild concept, the Ouroboros of stand-up.
Okay, so right off the bat, we get this, the locus of generative tension. It sounds super academic, I know, but here's what it's really saying. A joke is basically the visible spark that happens when two completely opposite ideas smash into each other. And today, we're going to pull that whole idea apart and see exactly what it means.
So really, what is the secret to a perfect joke? Is it just timing? Or, being relatable? Or could it be something way deeper, something that's literally hardwired into the universe? This framework we're looking at suggests it's not just one thing, but a whole dynamic system. Let's dig in and find out.
Our journey starts with the theory's biggest, most out there claim, that comedy isn't just for fun. No, it's a fundamental force of nature.
Just think about that for a second. The idea here is that humor is an absolutely necessary mechanism to keep us, and all of society, from getting bogged down. It's that jolt that shakes up our rigid thinking and forces us to see the world in a completely new light. It's not just about getting a laugh, it's an engine for actual change.
So, how in the world does this cosmic engine actually work? Well, to get it, we've got to zoom way in and look at its most basic part, a single joke.
Pretty much every joke you've ever heard is built on this simple duality. On one hand, you've got the static nature. That's the setup. It builds this nice, predictable little world in our minds. Then, bam, the dynamic nature, the punchline, smashes in and just shatters that world. And it's in that shattering that we find the laugh.
And this is where it gets really clear. This is the classic rule of three in action. Step 1, Monday, it sets up an expectation. Step 2, Tuesday, confirms it. Now your brain has totally locked into the pattern days of the week. So when step 3 hits you with banana, the violation is so clean, so perfect, that your brain has only one way to deal with the shock: laughter.
Okay, but it doesn't stop there. It actually gets deeper. This whole setup and punchline dynamic is held up by 4 core principles that this framework calls the 4 pillars.
So, the first pillar is symmetry. Think of this as the joke's backbone. It's that pattern-making part of our brain that just loves order. The Monday, Tuesday part of the joke? That is pure symmetry. It's laying down the train tracks that the punchline is about to jump right off of.
All right. Next, we've got balance. See, after the shock of the punchline, our brains need to get back to normal. And that laugh, that's the release. It's like a safety valve letting off steam so our minds can get back to a state of equilibrium. It's that deep breath you take after a good surprise.
Pillar 3 is unity. This one is the social glue. When you laugh with somebody, you're basically signaling that you see the world the same way they do. It creates this instant in-group, this feeling of shared understanding. So a really great joke doesn't just make one person laugh, it makes an entire room feel connected.
And finally, we get to the real powerhouse, paradox. This is the banana moment. It's that delightful, completely nonsensical collision of two unrelated concepts, days of the week and fruit. This is where the magic, the pure creative spark of all comedy, really happens.
And here's what's so cool. These 4 pillars aren't just some new ideas pulled out of thin air. They actually bring together all these classic comedy theories that have been around for centuries. Symmetry creates the setup for the incongruity theory. Balance is the core idea behind relief theory. Unity is what explains superiority theory. And paradox, that's the engine for the benign violation theory. It all just fits.
Okay, so that's the theory. But how does this actually look on the stage? Well, it turns out these pillars don't just define the jokes, they define the comedians themselves. They create these archetypes that we all instantly recognize.
You basically have these two opposing forces on stage. First, the straight man. Think Jerry Seinfeld. He's the agent of symmetry. He observes the world, points out all the ways it violates the normal rules, and asks that famous question, what's the deal with? But on the other side, you have the trickster, like an Andy Kaufman. He is the violation. He is the chaos. He embodies the paradox, challenging the very rules of what a comedy performance is supposed to be.
Okay, but this is where things get really interesting. What happens when a master comedian understands these rules so well that they decide to break them on purpose?
We've been saying the punchline is everything. It's the key to that pillar of balance. It's the release of tension. So, what happens when a comedian just refuses to give it to you?
what's the point of doing that?
This is exactly the point Hannah Gadsby makes in her incredible special, Nanette. She argues that the traditional structure of a joke can actually be a limitation. If you wrap up a difficult, painful story with a neat little punchline, you're giving the audience an easy out. You're letting them off the hook.
And that's exactly what she does. She builds all the tension of a setup, leads the audience to a really dark and uncomfortable place, and then she just stops. She leaves the tension hanging in the air. She refuses to provide the laugh that would bring everything back into balance. And wow, the result is just so powerful. Without that release valve of laughter, the audience has nowhere to put all that tension. They are forced to sit with the discomfort. And in that space, the tension gets transformed into something else entirely, a deep, shared sense of empathy. Suddenly, the joke isn't just a joke anymore. It's become art.
So you can see the whole journey, right? This Ouroboros framework lets us understand comedy on every single level. It starts with the simple mechanics of a joke, then moves to its power as a tool for social connection, and finally, all the way to its potential to be truly transformative art.
And that brings us right back to where we started, the Ouroboros, that snake eating its own tail. In this view, comedy is the exact same kind of fundamental cyclical process. It's how our conscious minds navigate a universe full of contradictions and absurdity. It's how we process the paradox of our own existence.
So, I guess I'll just leave you with this thought. If the world is built on this fundamental clash between what we expect and what we actually get, if our very existence is a kind of setup just waiting for a punchline, then maybe a laugh isn't just a reaction. Maybe, just maybe, it's the only truly sane response we have.